The focus is Iran, and the moment we're in right now could not be more important. We're hearing renewed talks of negotiations, whispers of diplomacy, and at the same time, very real questions about whether the Iranian regime is actually weakening from within. Is this pressure leading toward compromise or toward collapse? To help us understand, we have expert Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Admiral Montgomery brings unmatched insight into how military pressure, naval power, and geopolitical signaling actually work in real time. You do not want to miss this conversation. Nothing but the truth with Trudy. Admiral Montgomery, welcome back.
I'm really excited to be here, Trudy.
So let's jump right in, Admiral. There's been a lot of confusion over the past few days. Negotiations announced, delayed, moved, at times described as stalled. From your vantage point, where do things actually stand right now with negotiations?
So, in the last few hours, we've kind of agreed, the U.S. and Iran, to meet in Oman to talk. And I think the primary issue that they've agreed to talk about is nuclear. I'm not fully aligned with John Bolton, but he recently said that these discussions are a waste of oxygen. I think there's a reason the discussions are happening, but he's right in his implication that it's very hard to see how these negotiations can reach a consensual endpoint. Where both sides are like, yeah, I think we're about where we need to be. I think that the two sides are so far apart in what their end game is that these talks are really just a time, they're marking time while each side does other kind of preparations for possible other ways of resolving this issue.
Well, I don't really understand why they would be negotiating about nuclear. I actually had read that they were negotiating about ballistic missiles and drones also. I thought we kind of eliminated the nuclear threat in the 12-day war.
So first, I would agree with you that eventually the other issues will be ballistic missiles, um, drones, support to groups, IRGC proxies. There's a whole litany of issues we have for them. The description of why many of us thought the JCPOA was a very incomplete document was its failure to resolve these other issues. So you're absolutely right. Each side has a long list of issues to discuss. I just think they start talking nuclear at the front. And here's what I think on the nuclear program. It still exists, right? The strike on Fordo was extensive, but it was also, the Iranians knew it was coming. And I think they had moved some things out of Fordo that still exist and make the backbone of a nuclear program that still exists. I suspect we have an idea where some of those things are. I doubt we know where all those things are. Now, they're not organized in a way that they can be, developed in a sprint to a bomb that, the Israel and the United States removed. But that does not mean they don't have key elements of a future nuclear program still extant in Iran somewhere.
So do you mean the uranium that they have and
Yep.
that so one of the parts of the negotiations I had read was that they were going to be having to move the uranium someplace else.
Yeah. Well, that would be what we would want. Yes. I think for Khamenei, that's I suspect that that's close to a red line because it's, for the last 20 years, the regime has touted its ability to develop this to counter the, big Satan and little Satan, the United States and Israel, as a core element of their value. For the leadership in their communications to there's 125,000 people in the IRGC. I think 50,000 are ideologically motivated. They expect their leadership to maintain this capacity. So I think it's very hard. I think the Iranian negotiators will be in a hard position to negotiate that capability and capacity away.
So you said that you just said before that there was long lists on both sides of the negotiating table. So we know what the United States list would be. Actually, why don't you tell us what the list was? But I can't even imagine what the Iranian list could be, other than we want to do all that.
Yeah. First, you're absolutely right. I'll read one list to you, and you can just assume the reverse. I mean, I don't think so. I'll start with the nuclear program. I mean, the United States needs the nuclear program to the degree that Iran has anything. It's executed overseas, under the guise of being held by someone else, so that they don't have access. Um, two is that they cannot develop the ballistic missiles, IRBMs that can hit um, Tel Aviv and Haifa and Jerusalem and hit Israel, and then eventually ICBMs that hit the United States. Some kind of limitation on that. Um, three, I don't think we can limit the building of drones in the country, but we can limit we can say that if a drone leaves their airspace, you can expect a strong U.S. response to it. Um, and then, you know, I, I think somewhere, if Rubio's driving the list, there'll be something about, the performance of the IRGC internally in the country, governance of the IRGC. Um, I mean, that was a lot of people killed in the streets. That is that was vicious criminal behavior that needs to be held accountable. Now, look, we're not going to hold them accountable in a negotiation, but we can say you can't do that again. But I will tell you, that's hard to go, that's hard to control and hard to enforce. And then finally, their support for the proxy groups. That's got to end. The Houthis in Iraq, in Syria, Hezbollah, and to the limited degree that they supported Hamas.
So it seems really unbelievable that we would be negotiating a new deal. President Trump made one of the keynotes of his first election, uh, criticizing the JCPOA. He actually, on day one of 45, ripped it up. So, how could you negotiate? How could this administration be negotiating at all?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the president's timing has not been good on this, right? When it was time to take action, he didn't have the forces in the field, right? And when there was this uprising and he said, "Keep it coming, I have your back," he didn't have their back. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And the president's not responsible for missile production rates, that were established 3 and 4 years ago, for Arrow and THAAD and other systems. But you know, we're kind of out of sync here. So you're right. What are we negotiating for? I mean, sometimes I think we're negotiating to just buy time. Certainly, that's what the Iranians are doing, so that we can have the forces in play to kinetically enforce some kind of cost imposition on the Iranian regime to punish them for their behavior, or to set back their ballistic missile, cruise missile, drone programs in the same way we've set back their nuclear programs. I think Israel did a good job starting that, but I don't think it was finished. I think if you ask the Israelis, they probably had a few more targets ready to go after day 12. But President Trump pretty much very aggressively put an end to combat operations after Fordo, which was a mistake. In hindsight, a mistake. That should have been an 18-day operation. And maybe after day 12, the United States should have more overtly provided refueling support so that the Israeli Air Force was in a better position to continue to execute the missions.
Do you think that it's possible that they're negotiating just because this administration wants to say that they've exhausted diplomatic um, avenues before actually resorting to force?
Yes, and it buys time to be better prepared to resort to force and to respond and to counter like whatever Iran sends back towards Israel and the United States.
So at the same time that that negotiation is going on, or the attempted negotiation, we're seeing real military encounters. The U.S. shooting down an Iranian drone that aggressively approached an American aircraft carrier, and Iranian forces harassing a U.S. flagged vessel in the Straits of Hormuz. Um, if diplomacy does break down, what are Iran's actual military capabilities?
So, and I'll remind you that the Iranians shot down a U.S. drone doing the same thing about 5 years ago. So this is not unusual, but and that's appropriate. I think that we gave enough warnings to the drone. Now the drone doesn't have a human to listen to the warnings, but I mean the Iranians knew what was happening and it was shot down. That's pretty straightforward. Um, so look, what the United States is doing right now is building up its tactical cost and position. Those are forces in theater who can do this. Clearly we're generating readiness back in at U.S. bomber bases, so the U.S. bombers are maximum available to support this. We're moving refueling aircraft into the right positions to support both the bombers and the tactical aircraft. And those tactical aircraft come from two sources. One, the Carrier Air Wing, which tends to have four fighter squadrons on it of F-35s and F-18s. That's on board the Lincoln, and um, uh, a not stated number of squadrons, but historically has been around five or six Air Force squadrons spread throughout air bases in the Middle East that could participate in this. And so you now have a significant number of tactical, many of whom are fifth generation between the Navy and the Air Force. So they have the ability to penetrate, F-35s or F-22s have the ability to penetrate. These are principally F-35s. But the other planes are very useful for drone killing and cruise missile killing, and have done that before in support of the defense of Israel and defense of U.S. forces in the region. So you're building up strike capability, then air defense capability, then aircraft air defense capability, and then finally you're building up air defense capability. These are Army units that come in and defend our bases that are spread. We routinely have people at 16 to 18 bases throughout Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Kuwait, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and of course Qatar. So, all those people have to be protected, moved, however we decide to handle it, sheltered in a way that we're confident they're safe. And then, of course, there's the defense of Israel. And the U.S. contributes to that. I mean, Israel's doing a lot for the defense of Israel, obviously, but the U.S. contributes both ground-based units and ship-based units. So you're starting to see more destroyers showing up in the Eastern Mediterranean that are undoubtedly equipped with SM-3 and SM-6 missiles. The SM-3 can uniquely shoot down some threats that are very challenging for any other missile system in the area, and was highly successful during the 12-day war and in previous encounters over the last 18 months. So those groups I think the THAAD was probably less successful than the SM-3, and the Arrow kind of sat in between. So you need those. You need to be pushing arrows, and Israel's doing the same thing. They're, accelerating as fast as they can production of Arrow, David Sling, Iron Dome with Tamirs because it's shown some capability against unusual targets, and then their own aircraft, being at the right readiness. They have a great fighter fleet, Israel, F-35s, F-15s, F-16s. They have a not great refueling fleet. They have seven 707s that are somewhere between 60 and 70 years old. That's not optimized for long range strike support. So all those things are happening and getting in position. So while we're doing this negotiating, the United States is setting up the best possible conditions to impose cost on Iran and then defend the United States and Israel. And we may be working with Israel on the imposed cost. It may be an integrated strike, which we have not historically planned well in advance like that. I mean, we've done planning, we do exercising, but we haven't really started a campaign together before. We joined a campaign in the 12-day war, but we haven't really started an offensive strike campaign together.
Do you think that they are planning that together?
I hope so. Um, the um, the We're much better together. I mean, it's a doubling or tripling. We bring a lot. We have much, we have our obviously, we have a bomber fleet. They don't. We have an extensive refueling fleet. They don't. They have a fantastic fighter fleet in the region. Whereas we have brought, we have people who are temporarily there on the aircraft carrier and at the air bases. But when you add them up together, the Israeli fighter fleets, is thicker than the United States one in theater. So, and we have slightly different munitions. Israel uses a lot of U.S. munitions, and they have some Israeli-only munitions that are unique. The U.S. has some munitions we share with Israel, and some U.S.-only ones are unique. Plus, we have Tomahawk. I should have mentioned part of cost and position. We now have somewhere between 6 and 7 destroyers in the in Tomahawk range of Iran, whether they're in the Eastern Mediterranean or in the mostly in the Arabian Sea. And we have not said this out loud, and I have no classified knowledge of this, but historically, when stuff like this goes down, a U.S. guided missile submarine shows up from there's four of them in the Ohio class, and one of them is usually on station, and they carry greater than 100 Tomahawk cruise missiles. So you get a lot. There's a lot going on there, and if you give us more time, I mean, our military is one of those militaries that the more time you give us, the badder, the worse it's going to be for the adversary. We definitely are not the country you call and say, I'd like to meet you on a street corner in 3 weeks, because we'll show up with game in 3 weeks. The Israeli military is more the one that like, oh, we're starting now, let's go. And they're very good at that. So we bring them together. We're going to be it's a little bit of, chocolate, a little bit of peanut butter. I think we'll have a pretty good Reese's cup, when we fight together.
So, as someone who has commanded a carrier strike group as yourself, how close is this group that you've just laid out? How close is it to actual attack?
So at this point, it's 100% ready.
Wow.
They sprinted over from the Pacific, probably didn't fly quite as much as they wanted. But now while they're waiting here, they're flying, they're getting their, pilots need to fly a certain number of catapult launches and traps, recoveries on the ship. They have to do those a certain number per day, night. They go up and they work on combat, make sure they understand any of the uniqueness about the meteorology, the weather patterns, the air density, things like that. They get themselves I mean, they have had more than enough time now to be fully acclimated, ready to go, understand what white shipping, that is merchant shipping, looks like, so you're not accidentally attacking the wrong kind of vessel. What the IRGC's daily footprint looks like, what's unusual for the IRGC Navy, that kind of stuff, what the Omanis are up to, what the Houthis are up to, seeing their radars, their signals. So at this point, I think they're fully acclimated. The destroyers are fully acclimated. If there's a submarine, they're fully acclimated. That stuff's there. Same with the squadrons that flew in. It looked like they came from UK to the Middle East to join the squadrons that were already rotating there. So those are fully integrated. They've been practicing, they have special counter drone weapons called Advanced Persistent Kill Weapon System. We actually don't have them everywhere in the Air Force, but we've concentrated them in the Middle East to shoot down these Shahed drones and slower cruise missiles headed towards Israel or headed towards U.S. force posture in the Middle East. So they're working with those, practicing with the sniper pods, getting all that right. So I really think at this point, U.S. forces are more than ready. Israeli forces, as I said, are generally ready. But Israelis are probably building readiness right now, like not flying the refueling aircraft a ton so they can fly a ton for a few days when necessary. Probably getting their planes, maintenance aligned. And so they're right. And then obviously getting munitions in the right positions, things like that. For Israel, that's kind of easy. It's a small country. For the United States, we need to bring munitions from the United States into the Middle East and onto the aircraft carrier.
So to set up this stage for America, how much was the cost in dollars?
Well, I mean, these are you got to be careful. So there's costs because they'll give you a big if I'm opposed to the mission, I'll give you a big number. If I support the mission, I'll give you a non-existent, a very small number. The truth is, we as taxpayers paid for that aircraft carrier to operate this year. It was going to operate in the Middle East. I mean, excuse me, it was going to operate in the South China Sea. It's now operating in the Middle East. It'll probably go back to the South China Sea for the end of its deployment. So we were paying for the crew, the flight hours, the fuel. I mean, the aircraft carrier is nuclear powered, but the fuel for the destroyers, all that kind of stuff, they paid for. Now, again, if I don't like this operation, I'm going to put the bill for that on it. Okay. Now, here's what will be unique. If we start to expend munitions and we shoot a defensive SM-2 Standard Missile 2 against something that we spent $1.7 million, right? If we use a THAAD, we spent $8 million. If we use a Patriot, we spent $3 million. Some of the ground attack munitions we have are anywhere from 50,000 to 2 million. That begins to add up, right? The more we hit Iran, the bill goes up, and the more Iran fires at us and we fire defensive weapons, the more our bill goes up. So those are real costs. And also the movement of like the jets from the UK or wherever they came from, but we'll assume the UK, that costs money, right? That was fuel you didn't plan on expending. Exactly. Again, if I don't like the op, I can give it a max number. If I like the op, I can say, well, you would have flown anyway a little bit. You know what I mean? So there's all these kind of things. The answer is until we really start shooting things, it hasn't had the effect. Now, I will put one caveat on that. If in the end we fly a lot more, we extend ship deployments beyond their normal range, it's something called burning readiness. What that means is instead of a 6 month deployment, if the Lincoln does an 8 month deployment, that 2 months really hurts. First, it costs money. That's money you didn't plan on. You only planned on a 6 month deployment. But in addition, you break the Lincoln more. You break its aircraft more. You break the destroyers more. And the bill for the post deployment gets bigger. And not little, these are actually big numbers. And we just are doing this right now with the Ford in the Caribbean, where it's staying extra and the destroyers with it. And so we are starting to burn readiness around the world. And here's the place we're not burning it in the South China Sea alongside China, which is actually our pacing threat, the one that we kind of maintain readiness for. So we're burning readiness over the Middle East and over the Caribbean. Again, the president gets to make these decisions. That's what, he was elected, and we're doing this. But it's a note to self that those are the costs. And it's funny, the people who like add up costs to yell at the President Trump afterwards don't actually understand that burning readiness one. That's the one that worries me. It's when you stay longer. So if they have this extended negotiation for like 5 months and the Lincoln's there for 5 months, now we got a problem. Those squadrons. Now you can rotate these things, but getting an aircraft carrier is hard. Rotating the Air Force squadron is probably a little bit easier, but costs a little bit of money. So it begins to build up. So when you ask me, does this cost money? It's munitions plus time on station. Those are the two things I watch carefully as a former strike group commander.
So the only reason I was asking that, and that has been such a fascinating answer, and I think, you brought up things that the average person just would not even know. But I was asking because if a lot of money, and now we see like all of this was expended for this, then I kind of get the feeling that there is a strike planned, that this isn't, they didn't move all this into the area and set up this stage just you know, uh, for the look of it. I think that as an average person, I would think it was, done for the purposes of a strike. Um, do you feel that way?
So, do I feel that the
Well,
negotiations are just a delay tactic?
well, yeah, knowing how much it takes to set up an arena like this and a stage like this, after having been a commander yourself,
Yeah.
do you feel like this wouldn't be done if it wasn't for the
Oh no,
purpose of a strike?
yeah, definitely. If I was the carrier strike group commander, I've had this experience as a unit commander in different, ship commander, squadron commander, carrier strike commander. That okay, I'm going to actually be involved in combat. I would say if I was the carrier strike group commander, I would believe I'm closer to being involved in combat than not. In other words, I think we've passed the 50% point. And that's mostly because to go back to the very beginning of our discussion, I don't think there's a there in a consent. I don't think there's a magic rabbit to pull out of the hat where Khomeini goes, here's what I'm willing to give, and Trump goes, here's what I'm willing to give. Hey, we're in a good spot. If you don't believe that, then kind of you're at the other end of the game and you're going, okay, well, I guess it's, we're headed towards this. I just don't know what the end goal is, right? My problem with the imposing costs is if I went to the CEO, the carry the strike group commander is like, hey, I have tactical objectives. They've told me hit these 744 things, assess whether they were destroyed, restrike the ones I missed, right? That's easy. I mean, it's not easy, but that's intellectually easy. It's operationally challenging. It's the people above him who are like, okay, what are we trying to get out of this? What is the end game that the Khamenei's killed? That might be part of the end game. They literally have no ballistic missile production capability left. That could be a good one. They literally have no drone production capability left. That'd be a good one. But it's hard to say there's one where the IRGC has melted away and no longer exists. It's very hard to kill 125,000 people. And as I said, the ideologically motivated ones, they're pretty sure if the opposition takes over, they're going to be hung. So I don't think they're going to like, hey, let me see if I can just melt into the street here, right? So my take is that we better have someone at the very senior level. The president needs to have a strategic vision of what the end game looks like. It isn't just I strike them because I can, because that just, I mean, that doesn't solve the problem, and I don't think it stops protesters from getting killed.
Based on your expertise, what do you think the end game is?
Unfortunately, I think the end game is going to be tactical, like destroy this, destroy that, destroy that, destroy the BMD, destroy the and don't do regime change. I mean, don't you not that you're not saying don't do regime change. Don't You're not targeting things that cause with a thought that you're causing regime change. It is not. Look, we might kill some IRGC leaders we have beef with. I get that. But I mean, the idea that we would eliminate the IRGC, it's not like we can call them all into a soccer stadium and then strike the soccer stadium, right? I mean, that's how big it would have to be. I just think it's very unlikely that we can achieve a strategic goal that is weaken the regime to a degree that the opposition takes over. I just don't, I could be proven wrong. It could be that there is a chance that there's fractures inside the IRGC that are not being reported, but I am not aware of those. If the IRGC stays strong, then I think we have to confine ourselves to tactical victories, removal of the ballistic missile production, drone production, killing a few bad guys, and maybe Khamenei. I'm not sure how the president feels about that, and what the briefing is on who takes over after him, and what our choices are on that.
That would be really horrible if 50,000 people are murdered so viciously by this evil regime, and they've been encouraged to protest in the streets, and then regime change just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Correct. That's why I said at the beginning, we're out of order. The president said things at a time when he couldn't do anything about it. And I'm not sure that I can give you a great tactical laydown that allows you to conduct regime change, to support the protests. But we certainly didn't have that 4 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when the president was saying that. That was one of those times when I know this president doesn't have the same kind of guardrails that he had in Trump 45, where people are like, "Hey, sir, you shouldn't say that. You should." I get that there's no one around him saying that, but someone really did need to get to him and say, "Sir, we got to be careful with it." Someone like Rubio, who he trusts and is smart enough to know this, that, hey, you can't. We're not in a position to do anything right now. We're just not. They are the IRGC is too powerful inside that country for us to do something right now. Don't encourage this. Do I still think a lot of people would have been killed? Absolutely. I don't think the president's not responsible for this killing. The IRGC is clear. But on top of that, I think a large percentage of people that were killed would have still been killed. I don't think it was that much of a, oh my gosh, Trump's behind us. More of us are going out in the street. I think he was saying things because he likes to be part of the action, and probably that was not the right time to do that.
So you've set up a very strong American-Israel coalition, and they seem locked and loaded and ready. What's the Iranian side of this equation? What's their military capabilities?
So in terms of stopping the United States and Israel from imposing costs on them, almost nothing. The Israeli Air Force did an excellent job, along with some special operators, in removing Iran's air defense. Now, look, it's reconstituting slowly, and it does get some help on that, we think, from China and Russia and others. But it's reconstituting slowly, but that can be quickly removed again. The real thing they can do is impose cost on Israel and on U.S. forces in the field, and I've mentioned that with ballistic missiles. They have a limited IRBM, intermediate range ballistic missile, a lot of short range ballistic missile, lots of cruise missile, lots of drones. But we've also gotten pretty good at us in Israel. But still, when you shoot down 92% or 94%, that does mean 6 or 8% got through. Now, some of it, sometimes the Israelis do a very good job of like assessing that's going to get through, and I don't really care. Where it's hitting is almost unpopulated. But Israel's a small country. There's not a lot of unpopulated, right? And they're aiming at cities. And the Iranians have not a care in the world who they kill. Whether they kill an IDF soldier or an American soldier or an Israeli civilian, they don't care. They have no ethical compulsion about what we call collateral damage. So they're happy to have their missiles hit anything in Israel with people in it. So that's what you're going to see happen. And they're also going to fire at U.S. forces again. They've done that, 3 or 4 times over the last 5 years. I think they'll fire at them again. And our forces are very close in some areas, within, 200 miles, 150 miles. These are short notice missile firings, and it'll be hard for our air assets to shoot down drones, and our Patriots will, and THAAD will be challenged. Hopefully they meet the challenge. But again, they're not 100% systems. These are 90 to 92, 94% systems, so things get through.
So you're also the senior director of FDD's Center on Cyber and Technology Innovation, and you previously served as the executive director of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission. So do you think that Iran has the offensive cyber capabilities to target the United States if anything should blow up over there?
Look, they can do some minor things here. They are not China and Russia. Do I think they could do some distributed denial of service attacks against water industry, against some of our lower hanging fruit and critical infrastructure? Yes. Do I think they can turn off the Northeast power grid? No. Now, let me caveat, do I think China could do that? Yes. Russia? Yes. Iran and North Korea? No. But they can do things. They will attack U.S. and Israeli critical infrastructure with everything they have. It's just that everything they have, in my mind, is limited. In other words, will they be able to turn off water in a county in America? You bet. But that's a much different thing than the electrical power grid. I think it will be. This is. I am very worried about our national critical infrastructure. Don't get me wrong. I think it's absolutely vulnerable, and the Chinese have us tattooed. But Iran on its own is not going to be able to do what China can do. So that's not the problem. What I don't know is, do they have sleeper agents in the United States that can do sabotage? Potentially. And they've certainly, they've done, they've attacked Iranian Americans, they've attempted to energize them to be anti-American. The Salman Rushdie case comes to mind. They've had some luck in doing this. But again, I think that's a very discrete thing. That's not an overall campaign plan. So no, I don't. Cyber, look, thought you asked me about your offensive cyber, and I would tell you, I think it is of an ability to do damage, as is the Israeli offensive cyber. I think we're probably the best offensive cyber in the world, and I think Israel is the next best, and then China and Russia are right in there. But we could do something to Iran with offensive cyber, and I think we probably have in the past. There's starting to be reporting that we did that last year as part of some of our attacks, and I'm confident Israel has been doing it routinely. So between the two of us, I think we could probably do more damage that way than coming at us.
So you bring up China. So sadly, we're almost at the end of our time. So I want to just direct us towards outside of the Iran arena. And how closely is China watching how the United States handles Iran right now, militarily, diplomatically? What messages does it send to Beijing about Taiwan?
Um, so it's interesting. Trump is using U.S. force a lot more than his predecessors. So there's two parts to deterring China in attacking Taiwan. Number one, do we have the capability to do it, the capacity of the weapon systems? Two, is there a credible belief we'll do something to prevent China from enforcing, forcing Taiwan to bend the knee and somehow, agree to one country, one system. So Trump's use of military power kind of lends itself to the credible belief we might do something. A lot of his rhetoric about Taiwan and China speaks the other way. He tends to not mention Taiwan that often. I mean, the national security strategy doesn't mention Taiwan. The national defense strategy doesn't mention Taiwan. These are intentional exclusions. the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Bridge Colby, gave a speech in Korea where he didn't reference Taiwan. I almost felt like a Dean Acheson moment when he forgot to mention Korea in the 1950. In the Chinese one, I guess it's game on. Yeah, China is getting a less of this. It also is a reminder to them the attacks, the 12-day war told the Chinese, hey, the air defense systems you bought from the Russians, that intellectual property is not so good. I think the Venezuela one's a little different, where the Chinese could have gone, well, they didn't maintain their equipment. It was just like relics. But the Iran stuff should worry them a little bit. So overall, I think China looks at this and goes, this does not cause them to say, I am more likely to invade Taiwan. Some of Trump's rhetoric on Taiwan could, and we'll have to see that April. I worry a lot about the April summit and whether the president walks in and says, let's make a deal no matter what. And that no matter what might be sacrificing some of our support for Taiwan. I hope not. That's what China wants. So I guess that's a long way of saying it depends. It depends how you view this. And in the end, Trump's the kind of guy that he makes a decision here, that's his decision here. He makes a decision there, decision there. I would not read too much. He'll make a fresh decision on Taiwan, one that I'm nervous about.
I said that was going to be my last question, but I lied. I have one last question for you. If you had to predict, based upon your expertise as a commander, as someone who's been in conflict and in war, do you think that America is going to be striking anytime soon? And if so, when?
Yeah, I do. I think 1 to 3 months in that time. Over 3 months, man, you're really burning already. I mean, look, again, I don't think Trump sits up at night like I do, worrying about the Navy's readiness, burning readiness, the readiness of the fleet 3 and 4 years from now. Um, but
So you do not think it's going to happen in the next week?
I don't think so. Now, look, we could have a terrible meeting. The problem with Trump is that you would make no money betting, on Trump and foreign policy because so much stuff's not on your bingo card at the beginning of the week, right? And so, I mean, who knew we were thinking about invading Greenland? I mean, so look, the right decision on this is about a month from now. When right now Iran's forces are up and down. Every time they're seeing things, we're flying planes, right? Up and down, up and down. Finally, you wear them down, and then you hit them about a month from now. That's the perfect to me. If you went more than 3 months, then then we're tired. But that's the difference between our two militaries. We get tired less. The Israelis are fine because they're at home. So they're like, hey, you tell us when. Give us 24 hours heads up, and it's game on. If we're doing it together. And one thing I would say, I do hope we do it together. I just think that's a message to everyone that's a message to our friends in the Abraham Accords. This is how it goes down. It's a message to Saudi Arabia. You might want to join that Abraham Accords because this is who we're allied with. And it's a message to Iran. You thought it was bad. It's actually twice as bad. And we're the wrong guys to mess with.
Wouldn't that be fantastic to send a message like that? That
Yeah.
would really be amazing. So, Admiral, thank you so much for joining us tonight and helping us understand just how consequential this moment truly is. We're at a critical inflection point with Iran, and what happens next has the capability to reshape the entire region, redefine deterrence, reverberate far beyond the Middle East. Your ability to connect diplomatic, military, cyber, and strategic dimensions and to see how actions in one arena echo across the other gives our listeners clarity and at a time when clarity matters most. So we're deeply grateful for your service, your expertise, and for always taking the time to break this down with us.
Hey, Trudy, thank you very much for having me. I'm really glad you're tackling this issue. It's a hard one, and I would say everything I said is, could be taken off the bingo card within a week by the president.
Well, I'm with you. I think that he is unpredictable, but you've really given us so much to think about. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern with our very special guest, Admiral Mark Montgomery. You can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. on the radio, But if you missed any part of this show or want to listen to any of our past episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.